Bitcoin is mispriced. How long will this last? It is mispriced because we are pricing it in fiat and people are not realizing what digital scarcity means and finite actually means when it comes to an asset like Bitcoin. I'm going to explore this more as we go along, but the beginning of the shows, I always like to do the same thing. I like to give away some free Bitcoin to the early comers to the show. So we're going to do the Bitcoin rewards program, the Wishing Well rewards program. And the first person to scan the QR code that's about to show up on stream will win some free Satoshis. You have to scan this with your Lightning wallet. That could be Wallet of Satoshi, Coinos, Speed, Rizful, whatever you end up having. First person to scan this QR code right here wins 521 sats. We're going to do one more toss in the Wishing Well. We'll do two at the end of the show. We're going to get into the subject of today's video, but largely this live stream I do every week on Monday, 10 a.m. Pacific Standard Time, is a sort of question and answers type show. So if you have any questions about anything related to Bitcoin or treasury companies or the current environment, self-sovereignty, self-custody, you can ask those questions in the chat. So we're going to do one more toss in the Wishing Well here. And only one person gets to win this. As I said, the first person to scan wins. But if you don't want to compete and you want some free sats, you can just use my Bitcoin Well link in the description. And I believe it gets you 5 free tosses in the Bitcoin Wishing Well. And you can win up to 1 million sats. The highest we've had on this show has been 210,000 Satoshis, which is pretty significant. 469, not as much, at least not today at the current exchange rates. But again, Bitcoin is mispriced. So what does this mean? Essentially means that other assets with similar characteristics, like gold, for instance. I actually don't think silver has a lot of the same characteristics as Bitcoin. It's an industrial metal. It has relative scarcity, but not nearly as much as gold, and nothing has the scarcity that Bitcoin has. So the next direct comparison to Bitcoin is gold. Gold is just a less useful, more historically relevant asset than Bitcoin. So if you price Bitcoin and gold, which is something we should actually do right now, I'm going to bring up Bitcoin priced in gold. If I can find that chart, I think it's BTC AU. Nope, that's Australian. Let's see. There we go. XAU. I knew it had AU in it. All right, let's bring up this chart right here. And this is something that people have been talking about for a while. But in my opinion, it's incredibly relevant because this is measuring Bitcoin in something of relative scarcity and something that has historically held its value throughout time. So if we do that, we can see that we basically, Bitcoin and gold. So 17 ounces of gold, is that right? Yeah, 17 ounces of gold equals 1 Bitcoin. I believe that's what this is saying. This isn't a chart I look too much at, but it's a chart that is significant to me because what it shows is something that has historically retained its value. There's this saying about gold where an ounce of gold can buy a finely made man's suit. And this is true. And this accounts for the debasement of money that's happening, or the debasement of fiat currency that happens and doesn't affect gold in that same way. So gold still does debase, right? There's still around 1 to 3% annually that gets added to the stockpile of gold, which essentially means that within roughly 60 years, the stockpile doubles in gold, which is pretty wild when you think about it. When 20 million Bitcoin have been released and there's only 1 million Bitcoin left to be released, and that's going to happen over 100 years. So that is significantly different than the prospect of gold. But you can kind of see here, we are closing in on the all-time highs of Bitcoin versus gold of 2018. So if we priced Bitcoin in gold, I would say, are very close to the bottom of a bear market. We've been in a bear market for a while, since July of last year, priced in gold, and we never really had any real semblance of a bull market, again, priced in gold. And are we going to get to the lows of looks like the end of 2022? I don't know. I think we'll turn around sooner than that, right? It'll be sort of a higher low, in my opinion, priced in gold. But this is largely a combination of two things, right? Bitcoin in fiat terms went sideways last year, and gold in fiat terms went parabolic. So if we look at gold per ounce, look at this. This looks insane. Like, these numbers are this is a meme coin chart, right? And as much as I don't appreciate gold or silver for that matter, but what I will say is that these are indicators of something going on in the market, of something going on in the economy, and something going on in the globe. This is an indicator that trust in third party assets is broken or breaking. And let's just go to year to date. Actually, let's do a full year here because, oh, shoot, my bad. And let's go from, so 2,700 to 5,000. This is 85% in 1 year. Gold does not make moves like this. And in fact, like, if you look in its history, it's never made moves of this significance. And let's go maybe weekly so we can zoom out a little bit. This is sort of the other representation here. This is 2008 financial crisis, right? And this led to people moving into harder assets, seeing money debasement happen. And then since then, right, this is 2011, it traded sideways till 2020. So this was not a good time for gold holders, right? But this is like the last historical version of this, and this is so much more pronounced than what happened in the 2008 after the 2008 financial crisis, and the huge amount of stimulus and money printing that happened because of that. So it is just bonkers what has happened. This cannot be ignored. This cannot be ignored if you're looking at this as a signal of what is happening. And to me, this is a signal, like what happened in 2008, right? Everything crashed, end of 2007, 2008. Gold went down as well, right? So that was basically a liquidity grab, a global liquidity grab back into gold, or back into cash, to just figure out what the hell was going on, what is investable. And then assets began to recover, and gold was one of them. So we've basically seen everything go up in a similar way. So let's look at Nvidia. Wow, that looks insane. We're just kind of going to look on this metric here. Actually, let's just go 1 year. You can kind of see, actually, gold has outperformed Nvidia in the last year. And of course, as you zoom out, you can see, I mean, this is March of 2024. And then only since this sort of AI boom has really taken hold here did Nvidia massively outperform gold. But you can kind of see, like, these are not trading in tandem. There's sort of like there's a reverse correlation right here. There's a sort of a move of gold first, then a correction and a rotation into these. Like, there's some other things going on here, but you can see that they are moving obviously up and to the right, and there's, as much as they're not fully correlated, they are ultimately correlated in their direction. And if we go to, let's see, what else do we have? So we have gold. What I'm trying to point at here is that assets are going up priced in dollars. And I think actually what we should look at here is Bitcoin. Again, let's go year to date. Oh, sorry, 1 year. You can see this massive dislocation between gold and Bitcoin. Massive dislocation that happened October 10th, right? October 10th was this massive liquidation event. There was huge crypto market panic. There was the beginning of talking about MSCI exclusion of MSTR and the sort of corporate vision of Bitcoin treasury companies having a serious nail in the coffin, so to speak. None of that's happened, by the way. And you can kind of also think about quantum risk has come in, core 30. There's a whole bunch of things that sort of all we can pull on each one of those as a narrative, as a story of why this has happened. But clearly, this has happened, right? Clearly, we have a serious uh, dislocation from, and again, the reason I brought up Nvidia, and I could overlay a QQQ on this as well. The reason I brought this up is because gold is moving similarly to tech, and tech and gold and all these other assets are just largely appreciating because people need to stay invested in things to escape monetary debasement. So has the narrative of Bitcoin, right? Bitcoin is built in, it was built off of the 2008 financial crisis to be fair, sound, decentralized money that no one can control and no one needs permission to use. Now, of course, if you zoom out, there's this massive dislocation as well. But you know, of course, if you zoom out enough with Bitcoin, it starts to look ridiculous. But we have had these times of outperformance, which is relatively recently, right? I mean, gold starts to look fairly flat if you zoom all the way out, of course. And this only goes to, well, actually no, this goes way further than that. This chart goes actually really far. So if we go to monthly, Bitcoin just looks absolutely insane. But we shouldn't again, there's signal here in what gold is doing, in my opinion. And the signal is that money is becoming worth less, that people are looking for a store of value. And there's, when you find something in the market that begins to not make sense, like the fact that there's been this massive recent decoupling or decoupling of Bitcoin versus every other asset, then you start to ask yourself why. And if you can't find a good reason, I mean, the reasons of you know, the decoupling starting on October 10th, massive liquidation of some trading pair on Binance for crypto. Does that have anything to do with Bitcoin? Not really. Core 30 being released. How many people actually know or care about this? Some OG whales, maybe, but really not that many. MSCI index exclusion from for MSTR and other crypto treasury companies didn't end up materializing. Where is the reason that is actually real here? Oh, and 4-year cycle, right? Are any of those things fundamentally changing Bitcoin? Are any of those things actually a good reason to sell your Bitcoin? And I would argue no. I would argue potentially, if they all continue to play out, there's a time where Bitcoin continues this direction largely, right, in a for a while, but nothing in the thesis of Bitcoin, its scarcity, its decentralization, its utility, its permissionlessness, its censorship resistance, the fact that so much is being built on top of Bitcoin. All of this is bullish for Bitcoin continuing into the future. So when something doesn't really make sense, that is the opportunity, right? It makes sense for gold to be up. It makes sense for Nvidia to be up. It makes sense for assets in general to be up. So when Bitcoin is down compared to those, it starts to not make sense. And that's where our opportunity lies as an investor, in my opinion. So a lot of people get scared out because of this dislocation, but there's that famous saying of, buy when there's blood in the streets, or be greedy when others are fearful. There's generally fear in the market around Bitcoin, and I think it's undeservingly so. All right, I'm going to remove this. We're going to get to the chat here. I'm going to go start from the beginning, but this one was really interesting. This was the latest comment from Chapo. Price is just noise. Price is noise because it's the exchange rate of fiat, and fiat is known to be worthless from people who understand Bitcoin enough. So price doesn't matter. However, price is reflective of sentiment, and it takes in a whole bunch of different bits of information. So as much as it is noise in the long term, it is also signal in the fact of it's telling us what the general sentiment is and what the people are willing to buy and sell at in the current environment. So we can tell that people are not bullish on Bitcoin right now because of price. So yes, it is just noise, but we live in a fiat world still. We probably earn in fiat, and therefore our wage is going up if we understand Bitcoin and we allocate to Bitcoin with our fiat wage. Nav with the first question in the chat. Great to see you, Nav. Any MicroStrategy covered call you're in? I'm in at 167.5 for this week. That's what I was last week. It expired worthless just barely, I think by a couple dollars. We're red today on MSTR. Let's see what we're at. MSTR is down 1.23% today. We're at 161. I'm going to wait till tomorrow to sell a covered call for this week. Just going to see. I'm not leaving that much money on the table by not selling one today, and I'm hoping maybe for a little bit of a correction in Bitcoin and MSTR, and I'll sell into strength so I can push my expiry up a little bit. Naughty Vlogs in the chat, good to see you. Gold is currently worth the equivalent of the top 35 companies of the S&P 500 combined. In terms of market cap, there's no way that makes any sense. Yeah, I mean, the market cap is insane. And I think if, the market cap is designed off of the current trading price, right? Buyers and sellers at the last moment, selling an ounce of gold or whatever, however you denominate it. And what's interesting there is we actually don't know the stockpile of gold. How much underreported gold acquisition is there from entities that want that information kept private? For instance, China, right? China has been rolling off of their treasury bonds. They've been acquiring gold. There's been an exodus of gold out of America, a bunch of export of gold in general. Countries like China, central banks all over the world, do you think that maybe they've bought directly from miners, bought in a way that was not recorded to just continue to stockpile this asset? The truth of the matter is the market cap's actually higher. But but that market cap is also based on the scarcity of gold. So if all of the actual gold was accounted for, then maybe it would be less scarce and less valuable because of that, and that would correct as well. But it just kind of goes to show one of the major flaws in gold, in my opinion, which is just the inability to actually be to have real accountability of this asset. Did you see Hashrate dropped off by 30%? No, I didn't. So I have been looking at Hashrate. I did notice that it dropped. I didn't realize it was all the way down to 30%. We're just going to bring up mempool.space here. We're going to add that. So we're going to have a pretty big difficulty adjustment. Difficulty adjustment is going to go down 16%. That's really, really high. That's crazy. So that means blocks are being found way longer. It's taking way longer than, well, minus these two that took 2 minutes. Yeah. So, sorry, there. Yeah. Anyway, let's take a look. Let's take a look at the mining hash rate. Wow, massive, massive change. This is the moving average. So even a more drastic change with the non-moving average, right? we're kind of safely above the 1 zeta hash here. We're all the way down to 760 exahash. Pretty incredible here. We're definitely going to see a difficulty adjustment because of that. Crazy. Wow. In my opinion, a lot of people are kind of like think that hash rate follows price, um, or vice versa. Price follows hash rate. I think it only makes sense that hash rate follows price. If price goes down, hash rate goes off. And so there's sort of a slight lag effect, but price has gone down, and it makes no sense to hash and use electricity that costs more than it costs to acquire the Bitcoin. So the hash rate compensates for that. So this is just the lag effect, in my opinion, of the price decline that we've already seen in exchange rate and the miners shutting off because of that. This rally is not market dynamics, it's geopolitical moves, in my opinion. Yeah, it's definitely possible, and I think that there is a sort of a reordering of the world happening right now. I think, specifically, America is trying to project a lot of power around the world, trying to throw its weight around, and really, actually, the moves it's making are much more regional, much smaller than, and much less powerful than people than it used to be. And I think we're going to see a shrinking of the empire of America, in my opinion, and the essentially the sovereign nations out there that have real assets will be much stronger because of it. And I think we're going to see less and less dependence on US dollar reserves. We're going to see a move towards the attempt of some sort of coordinated unit, right? We've already seen sort of there's a theorized trial version of something called the unit, which is a BRICS currency that is, I believe, 40% backed by gold, 60% backed by uh, a percentage basket of the BRICS currencies. It still requires way too much trust to actually work out, and there's also where who gets to hold the gold. Yeah, it's that's a nightmare. So the real reserve currency is Bitcoin, and it's not something that's going to be easily adopted, right? There's no incentive for a company that can print its own money to use something that it can't print, which is Bitcoin. So I think because of that, the adoption cycle of Bitcoin as a global reserve asset is intentionally slow because anybody with power does not want Bitcoin to be successful. And that's exactly why it works the best as a reserve currency. And just as adoption will largely not be because people are wanting merchants to accept Bitcoin, but because merchants want customers to pay in Bitcoin, it will be the same way with Bitcoin as a global reserve asset, which is I will sell you my goods, but I want Bitcoin. I don't want your rubles. I don't want your rupees. I don't want your yuan. I don't want your dollars. I want something you cannot print out of thin air, and I want Bitcoin. So that's it's from a want. It's not from a it's from it's yeah, it's the seller that is going to the seller of goods that is going to request Bitcoin, and it's gonna take a long time before that happens, in my opinion. Yep, also the day Core 30 launched, could be a good time to sell gold and buy Bitcoin. Yeah, I mean, it's a hard trade to make because both of them both have the well, gold is seeing the success of the debasement trade narrative, and Bitcoin is not. So, how long will that continue? Will it continue more? The properties of gold, even if they are not as good as Bitcoin, still exist and they're still understood. And, you know, there's still a lot of people with money that believe in gold and don't believe in Bitcoin. So, could it continue? Absolutely. And I think, Larry Lepard kind of has this saying where gold and Bitcoin are your life rafts, and Bitcoin is a better life raft, but gold is still a life raft. So I kind of subscribe to that too. I kind of see that as well. Mm, duh, duh, duh. I struggle to hold Bitcoin knowing that I can't really spend it. I would use it instantly if it was more widely available as a medium of exchange. I would check out btcmap.org. You can use Bitcoin probably in your local community to some degree. And again, what I just talked about is that the reality of Bitcoin being used as a medium of exchange is the businesses are going to want to demand Bitcoin as a medium of exchange. It makes no economic sense for you to spend uh, spend Bitcoin, right? This goes against Gresham's law, which is that bad money drives out good money. If somebody is willing to accept money that is worth less for their goods, then then you are going to pay with the bad money and you're going to save the good money. So it goes against economic sense to actually spend your Bitcoin. Now, where that switches in your mind as a Bitcoiner is facilitating markets, allowing other individuals and companies to hold Bitcoin because you left your Bitcoin with them, which grows adoption to some degree. And also the fact that if you were debanked, if you were not allowed permission to use currency, and you had a local network of producers that would accept Bitcoin, then you could still spend your Bitcoin for goods and services to live, which is a powerful thing, but sort of more of a it's definitely most cases not a need to have. It's sort of a nice to have. So Bitcoin as a medium of exchange, it will happen naturally over time as more businesses demand or discount you using Bitcoin as a medium of exchange. So I offer Bitcoin coaching, and I have a massive discount for people to use Bitcoin. So that is me, in a sense, demanding Bitcoin over fiat. It is incentivizing you to spend your Bitcoin with me as opposed to spending fiat. That's the only way that this seriously grows in adoption, in my opinion. Speaking of which, I'm going to show you guys something here that I've been working on lately. So this is my website, my coaching website, pathtobitcoin.xyz. It's linked in the description. I have a video about the coaching services that I offer, some resources, all sorts of stuff. And I have a really crazy offer right now going on. So if you book a 1 hour session with me, you'll get free lifetime access to my school community, which is called the Bitcoin Masters. There's currently 22 members on here. As soon as it hits 100, that offer is not available, and there's actually no way to get lifetime membership after that. So the only other way to get membership will be paying $21 a month or 200 or $190 a year, and you get some serious crazy stuff in this school community. This is a school community for learning, for having a network of other Bitcoiners to bounce questions off of, to basically start networking, communicating, building things together. And there's a 7-day free trial as well if you wanted to just check this out before booking a session or before paying monthly or yearly. And there's all sorts of different assets that you get from joining. One of them is this 8-part course, Bitcoin basics course, how to use Bitcoin, what is Bitcoin, how to buy, sell, Bitcoin economics, advanced topics. Each one of these is about 30 minutes, 20 to 30 minutes long. And also I have a how to sell covered calls to earn income on Bitcoin and MicroStrategy. And I'm releasing part by part another full course on here called Complete Privacy, Best Privacy Practices with Bitcoin and Digital Privacy. So this there's only one episode here, but I have about 10 in the making. We're going to go into how to use Bitcoin securely, privately, how to use layer 2, layer 3s for additional privacy, Tor, Linux, Graphene, all sorts of really, really great privacy information here. And yeah, we have the community tab as well, which I can't show because we have, I don't want to dox the members, but we have members from all over the world that have joined this school community. 7-day free trial, or use my or book an hour session with me, and I can answer some of your questions. I can answer some of your questions about Bitcoin best practices. We can set up a multisig, a node, whatever you need help with. pathtobitcoin.xyz. Book an hour with me and you'll get free lifetime access. That's only available again for the first 100 members of the school. And then it is monthly or yearly for all you guys. All right. So let's continue on here. This week, I'm planning on uploading my YouTube videos to Nostr. Any suggestions? Yeah, Nostr for video upload is pretty tough. You're gonna run into some data limitations of being able to sort of relay that to different servers and whatnot through Nostr. Um, I haven't really found a good way of doing it. I would post your YouTube videos on there for now, and then you can upload really small videos through Primal. Otherwise, you'll have to use something like shoot, the name is escaping me, but there is a Nostr service where you can pay for a certain amount of gigabytes and stuff like that. Your thoughts on 21 Jack Mahler's company? Have you bought shares? I bought shares when it was first announced, and I think it was like around like $15. I wrote it up to about 28, sold them all. And then Jack Mahler's basically started saying, "Hey, we're not a Bitcoin treasury company. I don't think preferreds are going to work. We're going to be, you know, profitable Bitcoin company." Okay, I'm not investing in a Bitcoin startup that is public without any sort of knowledge of what's going on here. Maybe they'll do a backwards or a buyout of Strike. That makes sense. I think they've talked about Bitcoin lending. Okay, that makes sense. This is just not how it's just not something that I want to invest in, a Bitcoin startup that I have. There's too much uncertainty there. And I think that um as much as like it seems like a no-brainer because Tether is seriously involved, SoftBank is seriously involved, and you know, Jack Mahler's is built a very profitable company with Strike. It just doesn't make sense to me to invest in something that I have no idea what it is. And I think that it's a bad environment currently to invest in something that is so speculative when you could just buy Bitcoin. I would way rather have Bitcoin in cold storage than own any amount of shares of 21 Capital. I just I just don't have faith in it. And you know, eventually, I'm sure they'll do really well, but I just don't want to be around for this rocky start of this company. I would much rather hold Bitcoin and buy some shares of that if I believe that it's going to be a good company at some point when some of those things have been ironed out. But right now, you're buying a black box. And it's crazy because that's how it's always been, but that was, you know, pre-merger of SPAC. Now they've merged, their share price is down even further than it was when it was a SPAC, and it's still a black box of what the hell even is this thing? What the hell is even that? Uh just got to keep getting more and more merchants to accept it. Yeah. I mean, yeah, again, I think that it's sort of a you're swimming upstream because the merchants are the ones who are going to want to accept it. Right? It's not it's sort of this when you're talking about sales, it's like you can push a product on somebody, but when you have the best product, you're going to have people coming to you to want to buy it. So Bitcoin is the best product, and eventually more and more Bitcoiners are going to be running businesses that want to accept Bitcoin, just like I am, right? I'm running a business that accepts Bitcoin, and I incentivize Bitcoin usage because I have offer a discount. So I think that is eventually going to be what happens. I don't think there's anything wrong. So that being said, there's nothing wrong with swimming upstream. There's nothing wrong with trying to get merchants involved. And in fact, I am part wrong side. I'm part of a team here locally in Bitcoin Valley that is swimming upstream. We are getting merchants to accept Bitcoin. There's about, I think, 25 businesses here in my small little town on Vancouver Island that accepts Bitcoin now because of our efforts to get businesses to accept Bitcoin. So swimming upstream is working, right? But there's, you know, all of the complications that go with spending Bitcoin, which is, you know, tax implications, and you're getting rid of good money, but again, you're facilitating more Bitcoin adoption. So I think it's a really great I think it's a really great thing to do. Um, and I think it's a good initiative, but likely I don't think that's how mass adoption of Bitcoin as a medium of exchange will happen. I think it'll be sort of a way for people to be early to using it, to accepting it as a medium of exchange, and therefore benefiting from it because they are early. But I don't think that's actually how it happens at a massive scale. I think businesses are going to say, yeah, I want to accept Bitcoin. If people want to pay me in Bitcoin, yeah, that's great. It's kind of like, think about Shake and Pay or Shake and Pay, Steak and Shake. Steak and Shake, they decided to adopt Bitcoin. Maybe there was people pushing them to do it. I don't know, but that has been such a massive rollout. That's 200 plus stores in towns all over America that now accepts Bitcoin as payment. And the other thing there too that's really cool about adoption, I think they even have a Bitcoin burger and stuff. But anybody that goes into Steak and Shake and uses their kiosk now says uh, pays in or you can pay in Bitcoin. Bitcoin? I thought Bitcoin was dead. I thought Bitcoin boiled the oceans. People still use Bitcoin. And then they think about it. And there's this kind of thing with advertising that people talk about where you have to have 7 exposures to something before it sort of sinks in. I think that's very, very true. I think if you look at your own Bitcoin journey, you probably were exposed to Bitcoin multiple times before you said, I'm going to actually look into this thing. What the hell is this thing? You probably had altcoins and all sorts of stuff, hitting Bitcoin kept showing up as you were just sort of investing in other stuff. And then it just led you down this rabbit hole and you realized, oh, Bitcoin is the apex predator of protocols and assets and money. And I got to go all in this thing. Is there any cold wallet provider, BTC, you would recommend other than CoinKite? Yeah, there's a few. Personally, I think the cold card is the best. Um, and I don't have as much hand-on experiences with some others that are comparable, right? So people talk about the foundation passport being very comparable. Um, Maybe it is. I don't have hands-on experience with that. So you could look into that, look into some tutorials and things. The other two that I would, well, I'll just say the other one that I would recommend for a lot of people, especially when they're just sort of, maybe taking a step into this space of Bitcoin, is to get a Trezor. Now, the major issue, there's two issues with Trezor. One of them is completely you can work around. The other one you can't. One issue with the Trezor is that there's two different types of software that you install on your Trezor. One of them is Bitcoin only. One of them has support for altcoins. You need to pick the Bitcoin only one. That problem is solved. The other problem with Trezor is that it's not air gapped. So if there's no potential, there's no vulnerability right now known of connecting your device into your computer with a cable, as it's still a device that can't connect to the internet, and you're deciding when to transfer data back and forth. But having air gapped capabilities does sort of future proof if there ends up being some sort of vulnerability found with that. So that would be the one downside, I would say. But Trezors are very cheap, especially you don't want to go older than at least the Safe 3 because they don't have secure element chips in the ones older than that. The new Trezor, like the Trezor 7, I'd say there's 0 point of getting that thing. It's as expensive as a cold card, and a cold card is just so much better. Um, but yeah, that would be what I have to say about that. How hard is it to crack a passphrase if someone finds your words but not the passphrase? It's about as hard as somebody trying to crack a password. It's possible. It depends on how complicated you make it. Depends on how unrelated you make it to things in your life. Um, it's just it's First off, they have to know there's a passphrase, which is not intrinsically known by somebody getting a seed phrase. Um, if you set up a very convincing dummy wallet on that seed phrase, you might be okay. And then the passphrase itself, if you make it complicated enough, if they don't have access to it wherever you've stored backups of it, it's as safe as a password. So we're 40 minutes in. Lots of great questions. Appreciate you guys all here. I'd like to do an hour. If you have any more questions, go ahead and ask. And I'm just going to think about what else I can focus on here. Again, I would recommend, and I do have a link in the description to join the school community, Bitcoin Masters. You get access to all of my courses that are paid courses everywhere else. So I would recommend getting the free lifetime access. I think this is the best value you could ever get, right? You're paying the same cost as what it costs to do an annual membership. You're getting a 1 hour call with me to talk about Bitcoin specifics, and you're getting lifetime access to my school community, which is growing and more and more and more and more. So I'd highly recommend that. Link in the description. And you could also do the 7-day free trial if you just want to see what's on there. With the 7-day free trial, you do not get access to my classroom, my courses. It is to get a feel of the community aspect of it. And there's a 7-day waiting period before you get access to those courses. Just let it be known. We got Nav with another question here. What do you think of a 3 of 3 setup, or 3 of 4, or 4 of 4 setup for multisig? I think that is really, really dangerous. I think it's you could have enough backups to make it less dangerous, but if you think about a if you think about a 2 of 3, you need 2 signing wallets, 2 signing devices with your seed phrase or seed phrase passphrase within there to sign a signature, to send a transaction, to sign a transaction. And if you need 3, you're just adding additional complexity for no added benefit, because you now need to bring 3 devices together, and you need to have, well, you're going to have backups for all 3 of those anyway, but you're not really providing any more benefit. I think a 2 of 3 is a really good idea. I think a 3 of 5 is a good idea. I don't recommend having a multi-sig setup that is, 3 of 3 or 4 of 4. Yeah, 32 viewers. We're up to 35. They're construction drive. So, you know, your bag should feel pumped at that point. I'm actually going to go check out Zapstream. And this is a sign of, like, I don't know, like my views go bonkers when Bitcoin's price goes up, and it goes way down when Bitcoin's price goes down. So this is just a sign of how it works with Bitcoin. When driven by by the price. Bitcoin interest is driven by the price. So as much as, there was an earlier comment as well, which I agree in a lot of ways, but price is noise. Price is also what drives people to be interested in this thing. The vast majority of people in Bitcoin want Bitcoin because they still have a fiat mindset of trying to get rich, right? They want to exchange this thing for more money later. They don't really believe in Bitcoin being replacing the monetary network. There's a very small section of people. There was a very, very, very small uh, section of Bitcoiners that really actually will go down with this ship if Bitcoin goes down, right? If Bitcoin doesn't end up being successful. Um, so, that's price is something that drives people into this. And I think that it's sort of like a funnel, right? So as the price goes higher, that creates a larger funnel surface, and a small percentage of those go deeper into believing that Bitcoin should be a permanent part of their portfolio. A small percentage of those go into believing that Bitcoin is the apex protocol. They start selling and swapping out all their other cryptocurrencies because they understand that crypto is not related to Bitcoin whatsoever, the broader crypto sphere. They're completely separate things. Comparing them never made sense, but they did that at some point. So now they're Bitcoin only. And again, it's a portion of their investments. They still have it's sort of, they're hedging. They're both in both worlds. Then there's a small section of people that go all in for all of their assets. And then there's a small section of people out of that start to believe it doesn't matter about the fiat price at all. One Bitcoin is one Bitcoin. And a small section of that that will go down with the ship if Bitcoin goes to nothing. If Bitcoin dies, which is, Bitcoin's died a zillion times, right? So all of that funnels into a small section of these absolute maniac Bitcoiners. And that is a section, the section of Bitcoiners that is growing, because as the funnel gets bigger, there's more people that become like that. And the people that are like that stay like that. It's very hard once you become a Bitcoiner to break out of being a Bitcoiner. It just makes no sense. Like, you're going to start believing in fiat again. You're going to start believing in this thing that extracts value out of good, honest, saving people. I don't think so. I don't think people are breaking out of that. I think once you wake up, you're awake. So that base is growing, and that base is the floor of Bitcoin, and that base, just continues to grow. So it's going to take a long time until there's enough of a sort of a boiling point of hardcore Bitcoiners that will stop at nothing. And I think if you look back into the history of really monumental things that have happened in the world, you'll understand that it's actually a very small percentage of people, a very small percentage of people that create massive, massive change. There's sort of a boiling point or a breaking point. And oftentimes the greatest things happen from a small group of people. And that's what Bitcoin is, right? Bitcoin is a grassroots thing. I mean, there's the attempt from the similar characters in the TradFi sphere to centralize and control this thing, at least the price of it and the interest in it and all sorts of stuff. And they're playing fiat games. Like, people talk about, oh, Larry Fink is the number one employee of Bitcoin. He is just in the top of the funnel, right? And his mode, like, he's in an entirely different funnel because his motives, he's so entrenched in fiat, and he believes that Bitcoin is a fear trade. When you're in fear, you buy Bitcoin. Bitcoin is hope, man. It's the exact opposite of what that guy thinks it is. And all he's trying to do is pump this thing up to get more fees, more fiat, to create more power for BlackRock. And to centralize Bitcoin, right, which is an entirely powerful thing from the side of the other fiat institutions that want to control an asset that is not within their realm of being able to control, right? If they could stop this thing, they would have. They can't. So now they're trying to co-opt it by centralizing coins. So that's a fiat. Those are fiat people, and again, this is the American Revolution. This is a small group of grassroots individuals who are who understand, who believe, who are building from the base of Bitcoin in grassroots fashion, and it will destroy fiat. These two things cannot live in the same realm, and the sooner you go over to the Bitcoin side, the better off you will be in the long run. That's my opinion. Zapstream and Primal were janky at the beginning of your live force. Had to come over here to YouTube. Well, nice to see you over here, Sin. We got a couple zaps from Zapstream. It looks like it's working now. I don't know. It's a little laggy and stuff. I don't know. I keep having problems with Nostr lately. It took about like 4 days for my notifications to update on Primal lately. And you know what? I think that's there's a little bit of a learning curve to get into Nostr, but there's also just an unreliability that keeps people away from it as well, which is a big problem. And if you actually look at the history of MySpace and how Facebook won out, it's because basically MySpace was bought out by Rupert Murdoch's company, and they just started pumping ads into that thing. They started reducing costs, and it became incredibly unreliable, and people started just moving over to a more reliable service. So that's a huge problem with Nostr. It needs to become more reliable. Otherwise, people will not adopt it. So there's people working on that. There's people building it. And there's people over there right now zapping sats to the show. So Moravian zapped 1,000 Satoshis. Appreciate you very much. And Sin Diesel zapped twice, 18 and 45. 1845. Nice. Thank you very much for the sats. What do you recommend for storing your seed words outside of where you stay? You could do a couple different things. You could have your seed if you have a seed word passphrase wallet, you could have your seed phrase stored at a friend and family's house. You could get a safety deposit box and have it there, but then you're sort of relying on a third party, and if it's only a passphrase, that might not be the best option. If you have a multisig, sort of a multiple location of each one of those signatures is a really good idea, because if you're ever under sort of duress, and you have a sort of a rent attack situation, you basically cannot spend your Bitcoin in cold storage. You have to go to another location to at least get one more of your seed words. So in that case, you're going to be going to somewhere where you can let somebody know that somebody's you know threatening you or whatever, and that's a potential scenario where you could get yourself out of that situation. So in that case, safety deposit box works better for a multi-sig than it does a seed phrase passphrase wallet, because you are relying and trusting the bank to not look at your seed phrase, the employee, rogue employee, whatever, and then you're only protected by the passphrase in that situation if that's the case. But you could store it, your backups, at friends and families for one, I would say. BlackRock with new income options based ETF backed with BTC is coming. Does it show their long term commitment? Thoughts on BlackRock's new filing for a BTC covered call strategy ETF and its impact on Bitcoin's price? So, in Canada, we've had Bitcoin ETFs way longer, and Bitcoin ETFs were like one of my first exposure to a real position in Bitcoin in fiat terms. I bought Purpose's BTCC.B, which exposes it to the US dollar price instead of Canadian. And I bought BTCY, which is their covered call income fund based on Bitcoin, which is exactly what BlackRock is building right now. So, or filing for. They actually announced this a little while ago. This isn't super big news. It's just sort of there's actually another filing that we can see that this is happening. This is more fiat extraction. This is a fiat play, right? If you're buying this, you will underperform. You'll likely underperform Bitcoin unless we continue in a crab market forever, right? Then you're harvesting volatility. You're not capping your upside with a covered call strategy, especially a managed covered call strategy. But this is going to be more demand for IBIT, which is more demand for spot Bitcoin, because there'll be a certain portion of people that like the income side of it. People that need some sort of income, fiat income in their portfolio, which is totally justifiable based on your age and your situation. So I think it's more demand for Bitcoin. However, it also means more short call positions on IBIT, which does hamper volatility to some degree and potentially suppresses price to some degree as well. So there's going to be some sort of net effect on that. I would say probably the long position, like it's more demand, but I will say there's probably going to be a large portion moving into that already hold IBIT and maybe do their own covered calls, or just say, well, I want a little bit of fiat. I'm already Bitcoin exposed. I doubt that a lot of people will add more Bitcoin exposure because of this covered call ETF than they already had. Like, I think it'll come from a Bitcoin exposure in their portfolio, at least initially. I think over time this will probably grow to be quite successful. I imagine it'll probably return in covered call fund monthly, but annually it will be around 10 to 20% is my guess. And then you'll get some sort of appreciation, sort of capped appreciation of Bitcoin's price underlying. Looks like they filed for the S1 for iShares Bitcoin Premium Income ETF on Friday. Cool. Yeah, I mean, it's awesome. I think again, net, I think it's going to expose more people to Bitcoin through this derivative of a derivative kind of thing. But of course, I'm happy today because for the first time, one of my videos crossed the 200 views in under 24 hours of being published. I know Bitcoin is down, so people's interest is down, but that will change. Awesome. Great to hear. I mean, that's awesome. And I think you have, you've talked on this channel before on the chat. I think you have, I can't remember what language, but a different language than English. That's awesome. 200 views is a lot of people. 200 people is a lot. So that's awesome. Good to see that. And I've had a couple of videos do really well too, talking about MSTR lately. But in general, videos are going to do better. Bitcoin videos are going to do better when price is up. Does it make sense to build a cash flow business out of income REITs and income ETFs and use that monthly and quarterly cash flow to buy Bitcoin so that it's like a 9 to 10% dividend per year? I am from India. So the problem with that is you are essentially delaying your exposure to Bitcoin. So if you took all of that income that you bought REITs with, or all of that cash that you bought REITs with and bought Bitcoin instead, you would be highly positioned to Bitcoin. If you bought REITs, you're going to be, highly positioned to the REITs, and over time, your Bitcoin position is going to grow. But if Bitcoin outpaces the 9 to 10% dividend per year, you're actually going to end up with less Bitcoin over time than if you had just bought Bitcoin from the get-go. So, in my opinion, all assets fall to their Bitcoin holdings and their ability to acquire Bitcoin into the future. So if you I would listen to that again. I would think deeply about what that means. And basically what it means in a sense is those REITs, those real estate investment trusts, are not going to have any Bitcoin on their balance sheet. So you can knock that side off. And their ability to acquire Bitcoin is any excess income that they are allowed to acquire Bitcoin with. They are not allowed to acquire any Bitcoin with it. So it's on you to take the excess income that they generate from charging rent and allocate Bitcoin with that 9 to 10%. And again, if that is less than the price of Bitcoin going up on average, then you will get less and less Bitcoin over time. So in my opinion, I think you want to hold income generating assets if you need income. Otherwise, you want to hold total return assets that are going to outperform anything else over the long period if your time frame allows for it, and if your goal is to build wealth, build purchasing power. So, income generation assets, too many people are obsessed with dividends and you know, basically a rent check going through to a REIT to you, but really that is just income leaving that asset and being paid back to you. If that asset can retain its value and grow faster than the amount that they paid out to you, or if it is just sound money becoming more scarce and more desirable and more people want it and it's appreciating faster than that, then that is better than dividend income. Because you can always dividend is sort of like dividends are sort of like a forced realized profit onto you. But you can always decide to take profits and create a dividend for yourself by selling some of your asset. But people don't want to do that, but it's the same thing. It's equity or value coming out of that asset into fiat terms. It's the same thing, but people just have this mental gap of not wanting to connect that. Only if I had known there was a hardware wallet, it would have saved me a lot of time. No ETFs, get the real deal. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, a lot of people make this mistake when you first buy when I first bought Bitcoin, I just held it on Coinbase. I didn't know any different. I just, "Oh, now I own Bitcoin." I didn't even know you could really I knew I could send it to people, but I didn't know that I had to have a wallet and 12 words and what those 12 words meant, and that they generate a private key that generates a public key that derives Bitcoin addresses. All of that's secured by the seed phrase, which, like, I didn't know any of that. So yeah, I mean, you don't know these things until you know them, until you look into them. Nav, just buy MSTR, do covered calls, cash secured puts on them. You'll make that 9 to 10% in a month. Yeah. Yeah. And again, I hate to have to do it to y'all. I know I'm talking about this a lot, but you join my school community. Look at this video right here. Earn money on MSTR and Bitcoin. And in fact, I'm actually just going to bring up another thing here in the community. One of my courses that I plan to build, which is, I think, as much as I just talked about it, not being necessary, I think it is very, very important, which is this right here. So I did a poll on the community tab. This one right here is a course that I plan on building: fiat income on the Bitcoin standard, bridging the gap between fiat reality and being a Bitcoiner. This will be a course that only lasts for 20 years, or is only relevant for 10, 5, 10, 20, 15 years, right? Until Bitcoin is the standard for everybody. But right now it's not, right? And we live in a fiat world. How do we sell our Bitcoin? Do we do covered calls? Do we buy the iShares ETF? Do we buy real estate through REITs, or do we buy dividend companies? How do we bridge the gap? So I plan on making a full course on that. And again, that's going to be released episode by episode on my school community, which is free to join for 7 days, or you can book a session with me and get free lifetime membership. Link in the description. And eventually, it'll be a course that's for sale. So this is the way to sort of get access to it, in my opinion. Have you seen the stuff about people saying anti-Semitic stuff? Semitic, I think, is what you're saying, and they get debanked and sent allowed to go to hospitals anymore and stuff like this. No, I haven't seen any of that. I just know that yeah. Anyway, I won't get into that. Nice. Yep. Spanish. Cool. Hope to see many, many more views. Okay, so we're going to do one last thing here. We're going to do 2 tosses in the Bitcoin wishing well. Appreciate everybody for watching. First person to scan the QR code that will pop up in screen here after I do my 2FA is going to win some free sats. And again, appreciate you guys all for staying tuned, for asking questions, for being curious, for learning about Bitcoin for your own benefit. And we're going to do a couple tosses in the wishing well. And you're going to win some free Bitcoin. First person to scan the QR code that's about to pop up on screen wins Bitcoin, courtesy of Bitcoin Well. If you don't want to compete against all your friends in the chat, sign up using my link in the description, and you'll get 5 free tosses in the Bitcoin wishing well. One more toss here, 604 sats. Actually, you know what? We're going to do unclaimed sats. Somebody missed the QR code from last week. This one's not a ton, but somebody's going to win it because somebody missed it. 449 sats of unclaimed. I'm quite confused by the BIP 110 debate. What are good reasons to not BIP 110? There's always good reasons to not endorse a change to Bitcoin. It's supposed to be temporary. It lasts a year. It's a soft fork, so it restricts the protocol at the protocol level, at the consensus level. And I think that any change to Bitcoin should seriously be resisted. I don't know if there's necessarily good reasons not to do BIP 110, but there's good reasons to be very, very skeptical, very, very cautious around a change to Bitcoin. That's what there is good reasons for. And then it's just up to you to do further research to see if it's valid or not, what they're considering, which is to reduce certain data fields basically, and to implement things that were on the policy level, the filter level of mempool policy in knots already, but implement similar type aspects in the consensus layer, so that it would be enforced the consensus layer, which would cause people not to be able to spam the Bitcoin network the way they are. It would reduce the ability to create things like BRC20 tokens and ordinals and NFTs and all this junk that is really worthless anyway, but it would actually make it worthless in a lot of ways, because it would make Bitcoin less usable in that fashion and more usable for simple Bitcoin transactions, for opening up lightning channels. You can still do all those things. And I think some people think BIP 110 is going to change some ability for some theoretical possible layer 2s that don't even exist at this point. But again, it's temporary. So in the meantime of it being introduced and used, then sort of a fix for that could be developed as well, to introduce a more permanent soft fork solution. But when BIP 110 is a change by itself unless you use it as a pressure against core. Regardless if you use it a pressure against core, it is a change. It's a soft fork, and it's it needs to have some serious adoption especially by mining nodes, so that the longest chain does become a soft fork chain, and then there's an economic incentive to run the soft fork. Otherwise, you'll be mining into an orphaned chain. So yeah, it is a change, and I mean, it is to, in some ways, to pressure against core, but I feel like that ship has already sailed. Like Knots was a way to try to pressure core, and core had to redact 30 because of a bug, which I think Knots has to some. I haven't been following it too closely, but I think Knots has that problem as well, or something like that. Um, so yeah, basically, don't have a legacy wallet on your node and don't try to migrate it. As far as I understand, um, but yeah, I mean, it is a change. So yeah. I'd just be careful. I'd be careful about updating your node right now. I would look deeper into it. I don't have all the information. I haven't even really made a video exploring BIP 110 too much. I have a video on how to sideload it onto Start9, and I think actually that's probably outdated at this point. I think you can just update it more easily than that. But just be cautious, because if you are updating to, I believe, the newest version of Knots, on some of these services, if you're updating to that, you are signaling for the BIP 110. So, know what you're doing, make a conscious choice to signal for that if that's what you want to do, and make a conscious choice not to signal for that if that's what you believe is the right step as well. Be aware of what your node is doing, I would say. So that's what I'll say there. Thanks everybody for tuning in again. 7-day free trial on the School community, linked in the description, or book a one-on-one to get the lifetime membership. Trying to build something here, trying to create a really good Bitcoin community. MDR 8. Sorry, I'm not going to get to your question. Got to end the stream here. Already 6 minutes over. Appreciate everybody, and we'll see you on the next live stream, 10 a.m. Pacific Standard Time.